Hello and welcome back to the channel, Fight fans. From the Predator leaving the UFC to join the PFL, to how Bones' next fight against Stipe Miocic may be his last. Here's why Jon Jones hates Francis Ngannou. Now, the UFC is the most prestigious combat sport organization out there, and there's no doubt that any fighter out there would give an arm and a leg just to get a contract. So when Ngannou decided to leave and flush Dana White's plans down the drain, there was only one thing on everyone's minds. Why would any sane fighter leave the UFC at the height of their career? Especially a champion as dominant as Ngannou, who would have only found more success. Something just didn't add up. Well, apparently Francis believes that the UFC was actually holding him back. He explained that after he reached the top of the heavyweight division, he realized his actual value, which the promotion, sadly, wasn't respecting. Ngannou found a lack of freedom in his time at the UFC, frustrated that he wasn't being paid enough to be held down to the company. Even after proposing a 3-fight deal, the company still didn't want to meet the Cameroonian fighter's demands. The former heavyweight champion said that he gave all his rights and power away as soon as he signed the contracts, and he'd seen what the UFC had done with it before. So he'd sleep better at night, knowing his free will was in his own hands as an independent contractor. After leaving the company, Ngannou could take his career anywhere he wanted, later ended up signing with the relatively lesser-known MMA League PFL, which for sure allowed him more freedom in his contract than his last workplace. That didn't stop the fans from thinking Ngannou had severely fumbled the bag, though, and CEO Dana White revealed the UFC's side of the story, doubling down on the fans' belief, all the while expertly throwing shade at the Cameroonian fighter. You see, Dana knew what it'd mean to keep Ngannou on board. So in a UFC press conference, White revealed that he desperately tried to offer the Predator a better deal, paying him way more than before. Dana said that if Ngannou had agreed, he'd have become the highest paid heavyweight in the history of the UFC, even more than Brock Lesnar, who earned $5.3 million in his career after just 8 matches. Man, the PFL might go bankrupt if they're paying Ngannou more than that. Dana gave his take on the whole situation, saying that Ngannou probably realized that he's in a comfortable position in his career right now and doesn't want to take any unnecessary risks. The UFC CEO didn't hold back from firing shots at the former heavyweight champion when he said that Francis wants to fight weaker opponents to make more money, and he's gonna let him do that. Oof, pretty hostile work environment, am I right? UFC veteran Chael Sonnen explained how the promotion was right in letting Ngannou go, apparently because he sucks as a draw. That's a pretty hot take, but Uncle Chael came with the receipts. When the UFC had projected $1.2 million in earnings at the Ngannou vs. Gane fight, they were only able to bring in a measly $300,000. So the UFC didn't care too much when Francis left, but there was one fighter in the heavyweight division who did, named Jon Jones, because apparently Bones had made his comeback in hopes of fighting the Cameroonian. So when negotiations fell through with Francis, who ended up leaving, Jones was reasonably pissed off. You see, Jon is considered one of the best fighters of all time because he's never lost a fight other than one disqualification. So if Jon retired after fighting Dominic Reyes at UFC 247, that would have been a completely justified end to his career. The guy's talent and grit really couldn't be disputed, but after seeing Ngannou come in and start manhandling the heavyweight division, Jones finally found a reason to stick around. So Jones climbed up to heavyweight and came back at the UFC's door, asking to get in the octagon with the heavyweight champion. And which fighting league in their right minds would deny the best in the world a comeback? With everything going according to plan and Jon stepped once more into the octagon, he was handed Ngannou's leftovers in the form of Cyril Gane instead. Jones didn't complain though. After all, Gane is still a great fighter and the title was on the line. So he took the fight, absolutely clobbering the Frenchman in just 2 minutes. Mind you, Francis fought Gane a full 5 rounds till decision, and Jon just wiped the floor with him like it was nothing. It felt like Bones made a statement with his win, telling Ngannou what would happen if they fought. Now, Jones was just a bored heavyweight champion with no rival in sight. So in his frustration, Jon did what any high-selling fighter would do. He started beef with Ngannou, claiming he ran off because he was too scared to fight the GOAT. I mean, he has a reason to believe it too, because Jones was very vocal about coming to the heavyweight division. So if Francis knew Jon was on his way, it's pretty convenient that he left the UFC so close to his arrival. After Jones took out Gane, Francis clapped back at him on Twitter, congratulating him on his win, saying, "Good job, Johnny boy," and signed off on it, claiming to still be the heavyweight king. Obviously a jab at Jones, who had just won the heavyweight title. So when John was finally asked what he thinks about Francis, oh boy, he sure had some choice words in store for him. Essentially, he claimed that even with all of the muscles Ngannou has, he's still scared of fighting Jones. Geez, that's not a good look for the Predator. Ngannou denied John's claims, doubling down on his contract being the reason he left. Afterwards, the Cameroonian fighter took to Twitter again to call himself the baddest man on the planet, prompting Jones to come in with some real hater energy, saying that Francis can only call himself that from across the street. And every UFC fan could hear air horns going off as soon as they read that. But it seems like Ngannou wasn't going to let Jones have the last laugh, simply retorting with "then cross the street." Oh, the price I'd pay to watch these two go at it would leave me homeless. But it seems like we might only see this fight play out in our fantasies, because the chances of it happening become less likely every day. With Francis's fresh contract with the PFL, there's no way he'd come out to fight Jon Jones as an exception. So I guess he's closed that chapter in his book for good. Ngannou did seem to ponder the fight's importance though. He said fighting someone like Jon is ideal for cementing his name as one of the greatest, and going against him would be a big fight for both of their legacies. Francis explained that the only way it'll happen is with a cross promotion, but everyone knows there's no way Dana would allow that. The UFC CEO is very vocal about keeping his organization and their contracts very tightly knit. A perfect example of what Francis meant by saying his freedom was being restricted. Instead, the Predator has been entertaining the chance of fighting boxers like Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder. On the other hand, for a fighter like Jon, he really has no reason to prove himself anymore. He's got one of the best careers in the history of the whole sport. Even now, he came back and instantly won a whole new weight division title flawlessly. So Jon would have to go out of his way to somehow arrange an Ngannou fight, when he doesn't really even need to. Now with Ngannou behind him, Jon might just retire after fighting Stipe Miocic. After being in the game since 2008 and breaking back-to-back records in the most dangerous fighting league in the sport, Jon is an absolute champion for still going on like he currently is. But his statement proved that time takes a toll even on the greatest warriors. Bones said that he's an old guy now for a fighter, and he's racked up some small injuries over the years. Considering that he's a family man now, he wants to spend more time being around his kids and would prefer doing that with his joints still intact. So he sees Stipe as a worthy fighter to step one last time in the octagon with, finally ending his career. Unless a fight against Francis comes back on the menu, which Jon said he'd only entertain for the money it would bring in. Now everyone wants to see it happen, but with all the contracts and company restrictions, coupled with Francis's inability to bring in money, Jon shouldn't hold his breath. Now, as anticlimactic as it is, one of the greatest fighters of all time might retire with a thorn named Francis Ngannou forever lodged in his side. So from how Bones' next fight against Stipe Miocic may be his last, to the Predator leaving the UFC to join the PFL, that was why Jon Jones hates Francis Ngannou.